these are the Aircraft Shadow series, and this is these are test frames for the exhibition at the Mayor Gallery. And this is one test frame, which perfectly all right, but we thought that one was very much better. And so all the small ones of that size, the A4 size, are framed that way for the exhibition at the Mayor Gallery. This is Avro Lancaster rear turret and drift gauge and drift scale. And my job when I was in the rear turret was to read off the drift on that thing and tell the navigator what the drift was, because as the aircraft moves over the land, it's being pushed maybe one side to the other by the wind, and so you've got to compensate for that by pointing the aircraft into the wind to go in a straight line. And I had 4 guns all armed up there, ready. The aircraft was going to fly off to Germany, bombard Germany that night, so that it was all ready to go. And this one over here is one of the working ones for the Warwick, and I flew in this Warwick. It's strange because it seems to only have, oh yes, that's all right. What we did was fly over the Bay of Biscay. I was still learning to be a pilot, so I wasn't piloting the thing, but I was taken along a second pilot, ready to look out for Focke-Wulf Condors, which were German aircraft, vicious things, based in Brittany, would come out and bomb our convoys. And sometimes we lost pilots over the Bay of Biscay, and our job with this rather unsuccessful bomber was to strap a lifeboat underneath, fly out over the Bay of Biscay, look for our bombed out pilot, bailed out pilots, and drop a lifeboat to them. Actually, although I did 20 hours doing that, we never ever saw anyone. And if you try and find someone in the Bay of Biscay, you've got a real job on your hands. This one over here is one of the series of Aircraft Shadows as well, and it's an AT-6, a Harvard, which was the last trainer one flew in before one went on to Spitfires or converted onto bombers or something like that. And it was in that aircraft that I got my wings at the end of my flying training in Oklahoma, in America. And we flew out there because the weather was so much better than in England. There were so many clouds and things in England that pilots would go up and get lost and crash. So it was much better. We learned to fly in a better climate, and Oklahoma had a very clear climate, and so we were sent out there. And beneath the aircraft, once we were in the air, everything was very bright and clear, and reflections from wings and things, very bright. You had to wear sunglasses because it was so bright. This is one of the working pastels for the exhibition now at the Mayor Gallery, and it's to do with tiger moths. And I did my first solo on tiger moths, but this is when I had a job as a prop swinger. I went into the Air Force in 1942, and they said, well, go back to Civvy Street until we've got room to train you, because we haven't got enough space at the minute, and everyone's, all the airfields are full with people wanting to learn to fly so that they could go and get killed, I suppose. And so I went back into Civvy Street. I got a job as a farm labourer. Then I heard that there was a chance of a job as a prop swinger, starting tiger moths. And my job was to simply go out and spin the propeller to start the thing. It wasn't quite as easy as that, but you had to be fairly careful. And this is the airfield that I was on. There wasn't a runway, it was a grass field. The aircraft were kept in hangars across a public road, so to fly them you had to have them taken out over the road onto the airfield. And these are hangars, and it was in the Thames Valley, a place called Theale, and there were gravel pits, and so there were big lakes, man-made lakes, reflections, shadows of tiger moth, and a hill behind. Well, I had my digs about 5 miles away, so I had to bicycle in 5 miles in and 5 miles back, and over a very steep hill, and that represents the hill, the road, the grass, and the reflections of these yellow tiger moths. This is not a wartime one, it's a Bristol Wayfarer, and after the war, one of the most civilized ways ever invented of getting to France with a car was to drive it down to Lydd, an airfield, a grass airfield in Kent, on the coast. And these aircraft, called Bristol Wayfarers, the front opened up and they drove your car in. They would take 3 cars at a time and all the passengers. And when they'd driven the cars in, we all went in as passengers, sat next to the pilot. Off we went, took off in this grass field, flew low over the sea to Le Touquet, landed at Le Touquet, they opened the front and we were away in France. I mean, it was as quick and as lovely as that. And I heard the other day that during the whole time that this they were operating these aircraft on this trip, there wasn't a single accident ever of any kind. So they were very safe aircraft, and obviously they were ideal for the job. This next one down, this working pastel was the first working pastel, or one of the early working pastels for the first A1 size large scale one for the Aircraft Shadows series. And it's a 737. I was in the garden thinking about a series. I'm actually painting a series of things about the garden, the seasons, how they change, and the colours and the reflections and everything else. And an aircraft flew into London airport, 737 it happened to be. It had a strange configuration in the tail, always looked as if the tailplane was going to fall off or something. And the shadow passed over the garden almost instantaneously. It went like lightning. And I wondered what shape that shadow would take. First of all, I realized that the shadow actually would take place from the aircraft all the way to the ground. So in the air, there was a shadow in the air, but you couldn't see it. Anything going in between, say a little cloud or something, you could then see the shadow. And so there was a shadow going. And then my garden has it's a wall garden, little wall garden, tiny, and it has various vertical surfaces and horizontal surfaces. And also, these shadows, if they hit a building, might hit several parts of the building, and from the airplane, when you looked out, you would see the shadow of the shape of the airplane, but on the ground, it would take all sorts of very interesting shapes. And I just wondered what those shapes were in my garden. And that was the start of being interested in aircraft shadows. And there's a red wall and an orange wall and a paved surface and a little bay tree that I've got in the garden. House with some, if you could see them, probably not, with some bird boxes on, and a little summer house in the bottom of the garden. And that was one of the first working ones to wonder how to carry on with the series.